introduce it today on LIB Radio as the sun's magnetic field erupts in powerful solar flares. And that is happening today. That is happening right now. They're saying you may be able to see the aurora borealis as far south as Southern California, which means we should be able to see it here from Nevada. We probably have clearer skies to be able to see that. Aurora borealis. Normally you're looking at the top of the planet for that, but with these solar flares erupt, as these solar flares erupt, the electrical grid faces a hidden threat. These intense bursts of energy can induce geomagnetically induced currents, GICs, in power lines, transformers, and other electrical infrastructure. Okay, we are back up on the Rumble, and so we welcome you, our Rumble family. The signal should be coming in very shortly. And yes, I did find the right buttons to push to connect the Rumble stream out to all of its various sources. So we continue. Today, we delve into the science behind solar flares and their impact on the grid, exploring mitigation strategies and the latest research to safeguard our power systems against these high impact, low frequency events, as well as we will delve into the global threat of cyberterrorism on electric grids. So that is quite a mouthful to put on the table. Now I tell you, if you are a resident of Florida, Gulf states, where the hurricane frequency has been rising, I trace the numbers back to 1990, and we can see the frequency and the damage from these hurricanes, severity of these hurricanes is getting worse. So understanding that now, you can have the opportunity to do better. We can do better. Should we will to do better? Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go into this research. This first article, I didn't type in the location for the article so you could have access to it. The article is entitled Severe Geomagnetic Storm to Slam Earth Thursday, that's today, the 10th of October, with auroras possible as far south as California and Alabama. This written by Brandon Spector, published 18 hours ago. And if I just take a second, I may be able to find the source of that article. I'm not seeing it, and I don't have time to stop and look for it. But here's what it read again. Severe geomagnetic storm to slam Earth Thursday, today. A solar flare and related coronal mass ejection that erupted from the sun on October 8 could result in a severe geomagnetic storm on Thursday, the National Organization for Atmosphere, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration predicts, NOAA. An enormous mass of charged solar particles will slam into our planet Thursday, October 10, likely triggering a, quote, severe, unquote, G4 class geomagnetic storm, according to an alert from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Space Weather Prediction Center. Storms of this magnitude, here, let me pull this onto a screen. Storms of this magnitude may disrupt power grids, nudge satellites off course, interfere with GPS navigation, and damage critical infrastructure technology, NOAA warns. The geomagnetic storm will also make auroras visible at much lower latitudes than usual. According to NOAA, the northern lights may become visible over much of the northern half of the country, and maybe as far south as Alabama to northern California Thursday. The solar outburst, known as a coronal mass ejection, CME, is a result of a powerful solar flare that erupted from our star on the evening of October 8, according to NOAA. The flare has been categorized as an X 1.8 class solar flare, which is the strongest type of flare the sun can emit. Solar flares occur when tangled magnetic field lines on the sun violently snap back into place. Some flares may be accompanied by CMEs, coronal mass ejections, fast-moving blobs of plasma that can take several days to reach Earth. If our planet happens to be within the firing line, no, that's okay, that was the end of the sentence. Upon hitting our planet, coronal mass ejections can cause major disturbances in Earth's magnetic field known as geomagnetic storms, resulting in technological malfunctions and widespread auroras. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association measures geomagnetic storms on a scale of 1 to 5, with G1 storms considered mild and G5 storms dubbed extreme. And going forward, there is little that individuals can do to prepare for the incoming G4 geomagnetic storm. But aurora chasers are advised to get as far away from city lights as possible for the best chance at seeing the northern lights. You don't need any special gear to see auroras, but viewing them through a phone camera can allow the colors to pop even more than they appear to the naked eye. Solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and auroras have become more common during solar maximum, the peak of the sun's roughly 11-year activity cycle. The current cycle's solar maximum was initially predicted to begin in 2025, but some scientists suggest it may be happening right now. Researchers won't know for sure until the maximum has ended and solar activity begins to decline again. Besides Earth, another object is also in the firing line of the incoming coronal mass ejection, the bright comet C-2023-A3, which is also known as Tucson Atlas, which is currently making its closest approach to the sun in 80,000 years. There is a chance the comet's tail will be blown off or bent by the solar eruption, according to spaceweather.com, as was the case when a coronal mass ejection hit the Horned Devil comet 12P Pons Brooks earlier this year. Skywatchers won't know if Comet C-2023's tail survives until it emerges from the sun's glare later this weekend. So, interesting story. I guess I should. Here, give me a second. I can probably find out where that story is located. It's not there. Let me look in a couple of places where I was doing the research. Here, let me just do this. I'll just pull up the title of that story by Brandon Spector and just quick search on that. I think that would be a pretty good reference to share. I hope you agree. So let's just real quickly find that story, copy the URL, severe geomagnetic storms from livescience.com. And I'll put up the link as well from Live Science. So post that on my Facebook page. for those of you who follow us there, as well as I'll post that up on rumble.com, which I have only 2 listeners on Rumble, but I hope you do check in. I did tell them to go check us out on Facebook, so they may have gotten that note before I was able to restart the broadcast. And as well, I can post up that link as well for those of you viewing us on YouTube. We welcome you to the conversation on my B channel YouTube. I don't want to tell that story again. Y'all have heard it before. I kind of fell out with them, but it is what it is. It's a very powerful platform, no doubt. The technology bringing it is no doubt quite impressive. It is the #1 video viewing or TV viewing platform in the world. Only thing is they got that bad problem with censorship. So we do the best we can with what we got, always looking to get more so that we can do even better. So one more place to post this link, and then let's keep going. I got a lot more research to put on the table for us all here today. Here we go. Back to the research. Where we at? What page are we on? Here we are, right here. This next piece I want to share with you is from a number of different searches where I'm looking for disruptions to the power grid caused by solar maximum, this coronal mass ejection event that is peaking today. Using DuckDuckGo AI, during solar maximum, the sun exhibits increased solar activity, including a higher frequency of solar flares and coronal mass ejections. These phenomena can pose severe dangers to Earth and its technological systems. These include 1. Radiation exposure. Solar flares release intense bursts of radiation, which can be harmful to astronauts in space and passengers on high-altitude flights. Increased radiation levels can lead to health risks, including radiation sickness and increased cancer risk over time. Wow. 2. Geomagnetic storms. Coronal mass ejections can interact with Earth's magnetic field, causing geomagnetic storms. These storms can disrupt satellite operations, GPS systems, and radio communications. They can also induce electric currents in power lines, potentially leading to widespread power outages. 3. Satellite damage. Increased solar activity can damage satellites in orbit. High energy particles can interfere with satellite electronics, degrade solar panels, and disrupt communications systems. Aerospace operations. Airlines may need to reroute flights that typically fly over polar regions during solar maximum due to increased radiation exposure. This can lead to longer flight times and increased fuel consumption. Space weather effects. 5. The effects of solar activity can extend beyond immediate radiation and geomagnetic impacts. They can influence weather patterns and atmospheric conditions, although the extent and nature of these events are still being studied. Now, we're talking about this later, solar maximum expelling this CME's coronal mass ejection on the 8th. Well, we did see right around that time Hurricane Milton in the Gulf of Mexico increased very rapidly to a 180 miles per hour wind Cat 5 hurricane. But if the If that were linked, then we would have maybe seen it continue to grow in power by the time it hit the Florida coast yesterday afternoon or yesterday evening. And it apparently diminished from 180 miles per hour down to 120 miles per hour. So the idea of a geomagnetic storm, or the idea of the storm space weather effects, is diminished by that fact. Point number 6, increased auroras. While not a danger, solar maximum can lead to more frequent and intense auroras, northern and southern lights, due to the interaction of solar particles with Earth's atmosphere. This can be a beautiful phenomenon, but can also indicate heightened solar activity. So mitigating these dangers involves monitoring solar activity through space weather forecasting and implementing protective measures for satellites, power grids, and aviation operations. I did this search multiple times to get these dangers into context, so some of what I'm about to share might repeat. List any dangers from space during solar maximum. Copilot returned the following. During its solar maximum, the sun's activity peaks, leading to several potential dangers. These include 1. Solar flares. These are intense bursts of radiation that can disrupt radio communications, GPS signals, and even power grids on Earth. 2. Coronal mass ejections, CMEs. These are large expulsions of plasma and magnetic field from the sun's corona that can cause geomagnetic storms, potentially damaging satellites and affecting power systems. Point 3. Increased radiation. Higher levels of solar radiation can pose a threat to astronauts and spacecraft, requiring additional shielding and protections. Number 4. Auroras. While beautiful to look at, the increased solar activity can also lead to more intense and unpredictable auroras, which can interfere with communications systems. Point 5. Satellite damage. Again, this is overlapping somewhat with what we shared. The increased solar activity can shorten the lifespan of satellites and affect their operation, leading to potential data loss and communications issues. So just a little bit more about solar maximum. The sun is at its most active phase in its 11-year solar cycle, leading to an increase in solar flares and coronal mass ejections. These phenomena can pose several dangers to Earth and its technological systems. We had already mentioned about radiation, satellite damage, communications disruption, power grid failures, and GPS navigation system errors, increased auroras, etc. So let's go and let's look at this record. And we've yet to bring into our discussion the idea of cyber warfare. From my understanding, there was a cyber attack on America's electrical grid that took place this week. Let me see if I can find that, because that was real important, and it seemed to be very low priority in the news cycle, and one can only imagine why. Cyber war attack on U.S. electric grid. And as I search for that, I'm searching for that as a news story. So hopefully it's not just going to give me a background. I'm looking for news. 7 days ago from Microsoft Network, power crises, U.S. grid threatened by hackers and in-person hackers. It's talking about increased threat and vulnerability. But I'm looking for, and I heard this on a news report. I know I heard it because it piqued my interest. And normally I kind of half-heartedly listen to NPR in the mornings. But when this story came up, it immediately snatched my attention. Let me see if it has a report on NPR where I heard it, National Public Radio report. And it would have been October 2024. Let me see. Searching for that. I do see one report from Tech Republic. It says global cyber attacks to double from 2020 to 2024, report finds. Well, if they're doubling, that means that something is happening. I see 9 days ago from Climate Crises 247 on Microsoft Network, climate change, physical attacks on grid leading to increasing power outages. And there's another story relating to what I was just talking about, the geomagnetic storm. This 1 day ago from WXIN TV Indianapolis. Will we see northern lights, power grid impacts amid, quote, severe geomagnetic storm? Interesting, interesting, interesting. I like the title of that article. I'm going to look at this other one with the cyber attacks to double from Tech Republic. A report from insurer QBE predicts that the world will experience 211 significant cyber attacks this year, marking a 105% increase over 4 years. On the first day of Cybersecurity Awareness Month in the U.S., research has revealed that the number of significant global cyber attacks in 2024 will be double that of 2020. Well, why is the news media not reporting these? Again, I heard a brief story on NPR talking about a grid failure, and it was attributing to a cyber attack. All of this happening as the conflict in Western Asia involving Israel, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen. While that war is going on and involving, on the other side, Israel, United States, and UK all aligned up as fighting against this Islamic bloc of nations, the continuation of World War IV, we've talked about frequently here. World War IV is the global war against Islam. Well, Iran is not cyber ignorant. Iran has suffered through numerous cyber war attacks from its enemies, including Israel and the U.S. Might they be fighting back? We do see quite a bit of activity with Iran linking itself more and more and engaging itself more and more with the BRICS bloc of nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. BRICS Plus includes United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Iran. So might they be getting some assistance of development of cyber war capabilities? Probably yes. Probably yes. Iran is in a significant arms trade, acquiring anti-aircraft missiles, the S-400 anti-air defense system, as well as we could imagine they're developing their capabilities for cyber warfare defense, which developing capabilities for cyber warfare defense will also advance your offensive capability. They kind of go hand in hand. So much trouble in the world. That's what we're talking about today as we're talking on the subject: dangers from space during solar events, solar flares, as well as from cyber warfare attacks on our electrical grid. Here are some of the largest power grid failures in the U.S. since 2010. I made two lists of them. They may overlap. Texas power grid failure, February 2021. A severe winter storm caused widespread blackouts affecting millions in Texas. California power grid failure, August 2020. Rolling blackouts were implemented due to extreme heat and high electricity demand. Northeast blackout, August 2013. Affecting several states, this blackout was caused by a failure in the electrical grid. Arizona and California blackout, September 2011. A cascading failure affected millions in these states and parts of Mexico. Midwest and Mid-Atlantic blackout, June 2012. Severe storms led to widespread outages across multiple states. Florida blackout, October 2016. Hurricane Matthew caused significant power outages in Florida, and we might add to that Florida blackouts, September and October 2024. First with Hurricane Helene, and now today with Hurricane Milton. New York City blackout, July 2019. A transformer fire led to a blackout affecting parts of Manhattan. Puerto Rico blackout, September 2017. Hurricane Maria caused the longest blackout in U.S. history, lasting for months. Well, there was another hurricane this year. It occurred, it was after July, I think it was in August, that has knocked out the power grid in Puerto Rico. I know because my dear friend living there came and stayed here in Las Vegas while the blackout was lingering on and on, making it difficult to live in Puerto Rico. And of course, in the aftermath of the Hurricane Maria, the inadequacy of U.S. colonial rule over Puerto Rico really became quite an issue there. Midwest blackout, June 2012. Severe storms led to widespread outages across multiple states. California blackout, August 2020. Rolling blackouts were implemented due to extreme heat and high electricity demand. Another research on the same one talked about August 2011. San Diego blackout. A major outage affected over 3 million people in San Diego and parts of Arizona and Mexico due to a transmission line failure. We had mentioned that one in the previous list. June 2012, derecho storm outage. A severe storm system caused widespread outages across the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic, affecting over 4 million people. February 2011, Texas winter storm. A severe winter storm led to rolling blackouts across Texas, affecting millions and causing significant disruptions in the power supply. August 2013, Southwest blackout. Transmission line failure in Arizona led to a blackout affecting 2.7 million customers across several states, including California and Nevada. January 2014, polar vortex outages. Extreme cold weather during the polar vortex caused power generation issues, leading to rolling blackouts in several states, particularly in the Midwest. March 2015, New York City power outage. A transformer explosion caused a blackout in parts of Manhattan, affecting thousands of residences and businesses. August 2016, New York City power outage. A series of outages in Brooklyn affected thousands due to equipment failures and high demand during a heat wave. September 2017, Hurricane Irma. Hurricane caused widespread outages across Florida, affecting millions of customers and leading to prolonged recovery efforts. October 2019, California public safety power shutoffs in response to wildfire risks. Pacific Gas and Electric PG&E implemented widespread power shutoffs affecting millions of customers across Northern California. And February 2021, Texas winter storm. Severe winter storm led to widespread power outages across Texas, affecting millions and resulting in significant infrastructure damage and loss of life. Let's talk about cyber warfare. We have been talking about coronal mass ejections, solar flares, and their impact on the electromagnetic grid and numerous power system dangers. Next, I have an article entitled Contingency Planning Memorandum from the Center for Preventive Action. A cyber attack on the U.S. power grid. Contingency Planning Memorandum number 31, written by Robert K. Knake from the Council on Foreign Relations, April 2017. And I'll push up a link for those of you who do this research, want an access. I see T-Teams in the house, and T-Tems in the house, not Teams, T-Tems in the house. Hatep Baba, Hatep, greetings to you. It's great to have you in the house. Thank you for being a part of the conversation today. Thank you for hitting the like button, if you could. Everybody, please do. Let the algorithms know that you do appreciate you being with your family here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. I'm certainly enjoying what I'm doing today. And the thing about it is we have to understand, people, ultimately, we're going to have to prepare because these situations appear to only be getting worse with the frequency of the hurricanes and the disruption to the power grids, as well as, and one of the articles I read earlier cited the risk of as many as 211 cyber war attacks expected within the coming year, which means we probably have already experienced them. And did I share that report earlier? Here is the report I was looking for. I think I shared it, but let me just double check. Share it one more time so you can have access to it. Cyber war attacks from techrepublic.com. No, I didn't share that link, but now I have shared it and I'm going to share it across all of the various platforms so you can get access to it. Okay, here we go. Here's what the next article that I had pulled for today. Again, here's the title: A Cyber Attack on the U.S. Power Grid. Contingency Planning Memorandum number 31. Introduction. The U.S. power grid has long been considered a logical target for a major cyber attack. Besides the intrinsic importance of the power grid to a functioning U.S. society, all 16 sectors of the U.S. economy deemed to make up the nation's critical infrastructure rely on electricity. Disabling or otherwise interfering with the power grid in a significant way could thus seriously harm the United States, could seriously harm Iran, could seriously harm Soviet Union, or Russia, I should say, could seriously harm any target of a electrical grid cyber attack. Carrying out a cyber attack that successfully disrupts grid operations would be extremely difficult, but not impossible. Such an attack would require months of planning, significant resources, and a team with a broad range of expertise. Although cyber attacks by terrorists and criminal organizations such as Israel cannot be ruled out, the capabilities necessary to mount a major operation against the U.S. power grid make potential state adversaries the principal threat. Attacks on power grids are no longer a theoretical concern. In 2015, an attacker took down parts of a power grid in Ukraine. Although attribution was not definitive, geopolitical circumstances and forensic evidence against Russian involvement suggest Russian involvement. A year later, Russian hackers targeted a transmission-level substation, blacking out part of Kiev. In 2014, Admiral Michael Rogers, director of the National Security Agency, testified before the U.S. Congress that China and a few other countries likely had the capability to shut down the U.S. power grid. Iran, as an emergent cyber actor, could acquire such capability. Rapid digitization combined with low levels of investment in cybersecurity and a weak regulatory regime suggests that the U.S. power system is as vulnerable, if not more vulnerable, to a cyber attack as systems in other parts of the world. An adversary with the capability to exploit vulnerabilities within the U.S. power grid might be motivated to carry out such an attack under a variety of circumstances. An attack on the power grid could be part of a coordinated military action intended as a signaling mechanism during a crisis or as a punitive measure in response to U.S. actions in some other arena. In each case, the United States should consider not only the potential damage and disruption caused by a cyber attack, but also its broader effects on U.S. actions at the time it occurs. With respect to the former, a cyber attack could cause power losses in large portions of the United States that could last days in most places and up to several weeks in others. The economic cost would be substantial. As for the latter concern, the U.S. response or non-response could harm U.S. interests. Thus, as for the latter concern, U.S. response or non-response could harm U.S. interests. Thus, the United States should take measures to prevent a cyber attack on its power grid and mitigate the potential harm should preventive efforts fail. They then write about the contingency. The U.S. power system has evolved into a highly complex enterprise. 3,300 utilities that work together to deliver power through 200,000 miles of high voltage transmission lines, 55,000 substations, and 5.5 million miles of distribution lines that bring power to millions of homes and businesses. Any of the system's principal elements, power generation, transmission, or distribution, could be targeted for a cyber attack. In the Ukraine case, attackers targeted substations that lower transmission voltages for distribution to customers. Lloyd's of London, an insurance underwriter, developed a plausible scenario for attack on the Eastern Interconnection, one of two major electrical grids in the continental United States, which services roughly half of the country. The hypothetical attack targeted power generators to cause a blackout covering 15 states and the District of Columbia, leaving 93 million people without power. Other experts have concluded that an attack on the system for transmitting power from generation to end consumers would have devastating consequences. In one scenario, disruption of just 9 transformers could cause widespread outages. Many experts are now also concerned that smart grid technologies, which use the internet to connect to power meters and appliances, could allow a hacker to take over thousands, if not millions, of unprotected devices, preventing power from being delivered to end users. State actors are the most likely perpetrators of a power grid attack. And that one is again from the Council on Foreign Relations. One more article that I pulled for today's conversation again deals with the potential threat of cyber attack, cyber warfare on America's power grid. This appears on foreignpolicy.com. The threat to America's electrical grid is much bigger than you can possibly imagine, but it's not Russian hackers you should be worried about. Written by a person calling themselves CB Squirrel 1. Let me post up this link for those of you studying along, following along. And then let's go into this last article here before we begin to wrap it up for today. One more, because it's rather long. I have to punch this up in two pieces, unless you go to my Facebook page and it'll just be in one piece. Okay, pasting it up for Rumble and for YouTube. Here we go. Here's what the article has to share. And again, we welcome you on our various platforms. Just double checking. I see Mind Bully is in the house. Alter Ego in the house. Both of you tuned in on our You Now page. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be of service to you. Article titled, "The Threat to America's Electrical Grid is Much Bigger Than You Can Possibly Imagine, but it's not Russian hackers you should be worried about." Written by Cyber Squirrel 1, Foreign Policy, July 31st, 2016. Greetings from the front. The cyber war continues. Our operatives continue to hit infrastructure targets around the globe. In June alone, we conducted 44 ops, hitting targets in 26 U.S. states and 6 countries total. Each operation impacted as many as 15,000 people and lasted for up to 4.5 hours. Of course, that's just our unclassified operations. The actual number of power outages our operatives have caused is 10 times that number. Interesting. Where are you going with this, Cyber Squirrel 1? As we continue to wreak havoc on your electrical infrastructure, your policymakers and cyber war hawks are rattling sabers, worried about online attacks from nation states, completely ignoring the threats that successfully target your power grid every day. The Washington Post, Forbes, USA Today, and even the esteemed Ted Koppel talk about Cybergeddon, trillion-dollar risks, and when, if not, a massive cyber attack on the U.S. electrical power grid will occur. Even President Obama, again this article from 2016, is worried. In the meantime, we quietly go about our work, disrupting power generation and transmission across the globe. The article continues. To date, there has been exactly just one power outage that can be attributed to some sort of cyber attack by a nation state. Last December, someone, many people say directed by the Russian government, but there really isn't enough evidence to support that accusation, someone hit up to 6 different power companies in Ukraine with a coordinated malware and denial of service attack. This definitely wasn't a random lone hacker in a basement. This took months of planning and coordinated effort. It sounds scary, but the outages only lasted a few hours and affected around 80,000 residences. We have caused far bigger and longer outages all by ourselves. We are everywhere, and yet almost impossible to find. There are other events that have impacted critical infrastructure. A water pump failure in Illinois, power outages in Brazil, a pipeline explosion in Turkey, a cyber attack on a dam in New York, even a blast furnace in a German steel plant was supposedly put into an uncontrolled shutdown from a cyber attack. In each case, the initial cause for the failure was blamed on cyber attacks. But in each case, once the evidence was fully examined, hackers were nowhere to be found. Still, that lack of evidence hasn't stopped the cyber war hawks from pointing to these analog events as examples of the coming digital doom. When that doesn't work, the threat mongers and profiteers point to previous widespread blackouts known as black swan events because of their rarity, such as the Northeast blackout of 2003 or the Southwest blackout of 2011. In both cases, a string of unlikely events occurred, including human error, before the lights went out. In both cases, most of the power was restored in just a few hours. There were no riots, no financial meltdowns, and democracy continued unabated. This is all the research that I pulled together for today. The articles that I was reading from, there is much more there. This one was fascinating. I wanted to kind of get to the end of it and see who is the guilty party. Who is the guilty party? And are we talking about rodents and squirrels as hackers? I think that's what this article is ultimately talking about. Let me see. Will we see the threat to America's grid? I'm going to pull up this article and go to the end of it. I had pulled it up earlier today, but I did not read it all the way through. And the threat to America's grid is much bigger than you think. And it has a picture of a squirrel right there in the front of the articles. I think that's where. Here we go. It says this. Then there is what we affectionately call the 9 substation problem. After a bunch of armed assailants opened fire on a substation outside of Metcalfe, California in 2013, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, conducted a study of the national power grid and found that if just 9 substations were attacked in a similar manner as the one in Metcalfe, the entire United States would be without power for over 18 months. Are you freaked out yet? Good. But the problem is, this scenario is extremely unlikely. First, that FERC study only looked at physical damage to the transformers, which are usually custom built for each location, and are only manufactured by a few companies, meaning a substation could take months to replace. Second, the study only looked at physical damage, which in the event of a cyber attack is extremely unlikely. But still, the prophets of doom ask, what if hackers had guns? Didn't you see sky fall? No, we didn't. We're squirrels. Look, even for our billion-strong army of small rodents, in the United States alone, the attack surface for the U.S. electrical grid is absolutely huge. There are over 7,000 power plants in the United States run by over 3,000 companies. There are over 55,000 substations and over 450,000 miles of high-voltage transmission lines. We squirrels have a hard enough time trying to take out small sections of it, let alone 9 substations at once. Anyone attempting to conduct a major coordinated effort to turn out power over a large region for a long period of time is going to have to find it a rather difficult task. Not that we're not trying. As of July this year, and this article again appears 2016. As of July, where he is. As of July of this year, we squirrels and our fellow animal operatives have conducted over 1,400 unclassified operations that have resulted in an aggregate of more than 67 days without power, affecting over 3.6 million people. That works out to the entire population of the state of Connecticut losing electricity for more than 2 months. And remember, our unclassified ops are just a fraction of the total. On average, we cause dozens of outages every day, impacting about 5,000 people each for around 2 hours. Compare that with the number of outages caused by cyber attack, which in the United States is exactly 0. Unless this one that happened this week, that I believe I heard reported on NPR and was not able to find any confirming evidence of that. And yet we, squirrels, get no respect. We've hit the NASDAQ stock exchange twice, as well as the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva. We've hit 64 schools, 30 universities, 13 hospitals, 6 government buildings, 4 airports, and even 2 military bases. And yes, our unclassified operations have caused 7 confirmed deaths. Despite that carnage, your policy officials just worry about massive cyber attacks directed by Beijing and Moscow. Oh, don't worry, we've got agents there too. Look, cyber war in one form or another has been prophesized for over 35 years. But if things got so bad China and Russia were to intentionally cause a widespread long-term power outage, you've got to believe that the United States and the world would have much greater things to worry about at that point. The ICBMs would already be flying. Minor threat actors such as North Korea, hacktivists, or the Islamic State lack the time, money, and coordination to pull off a black swan event. Not that they lack the skill, mind you. Let's face it, the cyber security of the United States electrical grid is absolutely pitiful. It wouldn't take a team of geniuses to cut off the power to any large city. However, simply causing an electricity outage and keeping the power offline are 2 different things. In Ukraine, for example, linemen drove out to each substation and switched them back to manual control. Power was back on in just a few hours. Yet there is a risk to the electrical grid from a cyber attack. But that threat is nowhere near the levels of fear, uncertainty, and doubt being peddled by policymakers, threat reduction firms, and cyber war hawks. If you really want to stop the ongoing constant attacks on the U.S. electrical grid, there's an easy way. Call Orkin. Until then, we are anonymous. We are legion. We are your unfriendly neighborhood squirrels. Pretty good story. And let me just copy, cut, and paste the end of that story. And it said it's not by Russian hackers. I'm going to begin to wrap it up for today. We have been talking about dangers to the power grid caused by coronal mass ejections, solar flares, as well as by cyber war threats and or attacks, as well as by unclassified attacks by squirrels and other rodents on the U.S. electrical grid. Is there a reason for us to be concerned? Oh, yes, there is. Is this Armageddon? Is the sky is falling? I don't think we're there yet. But we don't know. What can be certain of is if these things are occurring, the likelihood of us being told outright in a timely manner by our own government officials, they will probably try and cover it up, leaving us to wander around literally in the dark about what is happening. I'm starting with a man in the mirror, asking him to change his ways. I'm saying we got to be very, very clear about how we feed ourselves, housing and shelter. We got to be very clear about maintaining our family's fiduciary financial and or wealth position, expanding on it and building on it. In other words, yeah, you hear me saying it again, Pan-Africanism or perish. Pan-Africanism or perish. Any solution that does not include reaching out beyond our sisters and our brothers and getting to people in other parts of the world, any solution that doesn't include that, I just don't sign on to it personally at this time. Pan-Africanism or perish. To our brothers and our sisters who've suffered because of these phenomenal storms, we include you in our plans to collaborate, cooperate, and to do better for ourselves, our children, our families, for our future. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm a little tired. I was up early today doing the Carl Nelson show. Had a great conversation, too. I really enjoyed that. Thanks to Brother Carl for including me to talk about what I know about these hurricanes, tropical storms, cyclones, and the typhoons. Are they meteorological events? Are they man-made events? Or are they metaphysical events? Great conversation. I look forward to hearing more from you. You've been tuned into LIB Radio, LIB TV, and LivingBlack.com. Tell your friends to tell their friends that we have our own. And we're very, very proud of who we are, what we do, and who we are with. On LIB Radio, LIB TV, and on LivingInBlack.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.